nice thing is it's convenient, and we can all get in here, and there's plenty of space, so that all works out. So I kind of taken a lot of liberty with this workshop. Some previous workshops we've done for flower shows, I've done pretty literal interpretations of things that I might have done for that category. But after a little bit of feedback, what I kind of got from folks, and after the Christmas kind of design thing, what I really felt like, and again some direct feedback, that was we need people to really understand elements and principles and design skills. So while I have some loose interpretations of the categories per se, I have mostly focused today on really understanding some design elements and principles and things, why things work, why they don't work. So, you know, none of these things are literal exactly that I might do for the show. Number one, I'm an Oasis guy. I'm a professional florist. I use Oasis. So if you have to use alternative mechanics, good luck, because I'm used to Oasis. So of course we all know there are lots of alternatives, and some of these designs can be duplicated easily with alternative mechanics. So that depends on, I don't know if have they banned Oasis altogether now in competition?
No.
Okay, all right, good. Well, good, then I don't feel so bad. Because I feel guilty. I mean, for some of the other things, you know, we always have alternative mechanics for some of the workshops and the Christmas designs and stuff, just because it's respectful of the environment. But anyway, so I'm going to go through just a few designs today, spend most of my time actually making some things so we can see mechanics and how things go together and why we do the things we do. So the first piece, though, is complete, and I wanted to show you that, and so this is the circle design. So this is an inspired design based on the category, the actual class that you would see there. So this is actually kind of done. So again, I think the class is about just incorporating a circle was the generality of the class. And so I did that in the container. I chose to do that in the container. So you could do something like this, again, with the scale as a table and that you want to work with. You could use something, this is probably okay for the size of table you're working on, but you could also use a large plant saucer, just a terracotta or plastic terracotta saucer, and create this kind of a category, even on a larger scale than what we see here in this 16-inch bowl. So, but I chose, in this instance, to do something that was more interesting than just doing concentric circles. Because doing concentric circles, while it might enforce the category, it isn't very creative, and it's not going to score very high in the creative category. So what I chose to do was continue the curvilinear nature of the design, but to make it much more interesting. And so what I did was, the red is the dominant and primary curvilinear form here, and you can see how you can rhythm and kind of moving your eye through a design is very important to me. So you can see how here the red is much broader and it tapers down and curves around, but it doesn't connect, so it doesn't create a full circle. It creates it more motion, more visual motion throughout the design. And the yellow is pretty competitive with the red because we see here a pretty strong yellow, but physically it's secondary to the red because it's a smaller group, there's smaller flowers, there's fewer flowers. But because yellow is so strong, I wanted to bring a little crescent of yellow around the center. So the emphasis, the area that your eye wants to hit first, or that's emphasized in the design, which is very important to have something that's dominant, and that's that cluster of orange roses in the middle. So that all of this, every time your eye travels through the carnations, through the lilies, grabs the lilies here, is to emphasize that very center, again, round form of the roses gathered together. And then to bridge the colors, so we've got a really warm analogous color scheme here with the oranges, reds, and yellows. So to bridge those, we've used these little tiny these little leucadendrons with the oranges and yellows combined in them. So that becomes just an accent to frame over here, and again, bringing it, like we did the lilies, into the center. But one of the things to remember when you're doing something like this is to remember that it's important to always have something that's dominant and secondary, so your eye moves from one place to another. In this case, I think the rhythm in this design is very strong because of not only the movement of the colors, but also of the form, leading your eyes from where it's thicker to where it's thinner, where it's thicker to where it's thinner, moving your eye constantly towards the center. So, you know, that's just an inspired design for the circle inspired, the monument categories. I can't remember exactly the names of the class. I should have written them all down. I did write them down once. And then the green, of course, is just a foundation. So that's kind of my first inspired design for the one category, and it's really quite literal compared to some of the other pieces I'm going to do. Yeah. just was fine with me. It won't insult me at all.
How long did it take you to do that?
Oh, maybe 30 minutes.
Is it an oasis, Toomie?
That is an oasis. So I hid my mechanics with aspidistra leaves around the inside with tea leaves or anything like that. And then just did really low constant because I needed that shape to have the mechanics constantly. Again, if you wanted to use alternative mechanics, you could chicken wire the inside and insert everything and probably be fine with those kinds of mechanics as well. Put a few pebbles in the bottom or some kind of cracked stone or something and some chicken wire kind of crunched to put in there. You can do that very easily with that. So we're going to work on another circle inspiration, this time taking a completely different form. So we're going to do it out of natural materials and do it vertically instead of horizontally. So, sorry, I didn't pre-cut these. I wasn't sure. It makes me cry when I take a really premium plant, cut it into the blooms, but
We're crying.
yeah. So the mechanics here obviously are just a very pliable curly wool, and this is already starting to sprig, so I'm really getting concerned that we go out and cut it, now with the weather we're getting. Anything that's starting to flower, starting to branch, or starting to leaf out, we're getting a lot of leafage on it. So we want to kind of cut that very pliable. There's only one binding point, which I really hid right up here in the middle. The rest of it is all woven or wound over each other. So there's not a lot of wire or things, mechanics to have to do it. But you have to make sure you get your bases in very, very carefully. And it's all about choosing the right element. So I went through an entire huge bucket of curly wool to find the pieces that had really nice curly branches to them, or if you're cutting it out of the garden, really look at what you've got and cut the pieces that have this kind of gnarly, sharp angle to it, and then you can work around it and add to it. So I chose some pieces that had a strong angle. It would be hard to work with in a line design or something, but it created a perfect foundation. So you see these stiff branches would have been hard to manipulate, but then the little ones can just fill in. And you could certainly do it looser, or you could do it, more.
Toomie, I have a question.
Yeah.
If you want to work with that curly willow,
Yeah.
doesn't it also help to soak it?
If
to make
it's
it more
brittle, it'll make it
bendable?
more pliable.
Yeah.
Right now, what I've gotten, and what we've gotten from the greenhouse and from, we had some out in the parking lot here, has been actually quite pliable. So I haven't worried about it. But anything like grapevine or anything else that's kind of dried, you would certainly want to always, soaking it helps. So just like I was talking about a while ago with the curves in the colored arrangement, the paved arrangement, what we want to do is always make sure that we have both a primary and a secondary line. So if we took this orchid and brought it up to here, we're going to have to really think about then, what are we going to do? Where's the eye going to go? It's going to maybe seem circular, but your eye is going to kind of fight between these two. Now sometimes that kind of tension in a design, where you have dueling elements that are equal in weight and visual impact and linear impact, if you do that, that can create tension in the design, and it can be a powerful tool. But for most of us, that is a little bit challenging to manage and to master. So I like to take the easy way out and the safe way out and create one as primary and one as secondary. So in order to stabilize that, we're going to just try to move that flower through the curly willow. Just carefully weave it in. I'll cry if I break it off.
Times 50. We'll all cry.
But that's why I want you to see the struggles and the challenges of actually assembling it. And then we're going to bring this up and we're going to put the bud tapered into. Just work it in by controlling the placement. Pulling it out. Get one in and pop another one out. So this is going to take more than 10 minutes
Yeah.
to weave it in. So, but see, this already becomes dominant because it's taller, and it's got another bloom on it. So you always want to think about that. What's primary, what's secondary? And I was only going to use 2 in this, but I ended up, one had a nosedive on the cart, so it lost some blooms. So we're going to come to the back of this, since I think this category is all around, if I'm not mistaken. So we're going to make sure that we're finishing this front and back. And then we're going to continue to reinforce that line. Trying to maintain this circular form in general. So we can do that. Then, we're going to work at, I have some long out. We've been growing this for 8 months in the greenhouse. We used it at the Flower and Patio show and some of the trees. Have any of you been at the show yet? No. Well, there's more than skillets and pans there, so don't be afraid to go. I know that a lot of serious people don't go to the Flower and Patio show because of all of the axillary stuff that's there. But we have some pretty cool displays. There's some pretty gardens, so there is other stuff going on at the Flower and Patio show other than selling pots and pans. So don't be afraid to venture out and go. It's a good taste of spring for you. So we're going to take a little bit of that ivy and just wrap it around there, reinforce the placement. So we've still got this rounded form, pretty tightly controlled. And depending on what else we want to do, flexible flowers that we can use that are linear flowers, so line flowers like this delphinium. We're going to fight a little bit to create dominance here because we're going to use some heavier white. So on the side that's opposite the dominant Phalaenopsis spray, we're going to bring in some white belladonna. And so what we're going to try and do here is to establish that, to reinforce some more white. But of course, when we bring that belladonna to the other side, what are we going to do? We're going to make it shorter than over here so that this doesn't become too dominant and that we don't end up we're going to work that in to our armature. And so many times, and when I've taught armatures to you guys before, it's always a mechanic that we use to put flowers through. In this case, the vertical armature is just designed to hold flowers in place. So you can see this delphinium is shorter than this one. So we're going to have this kind of battle of things going back and forth. But the shorter materials are going to become secondary to this over here. But because this is a bigger flower, it's a more important flower, and it's a form flower, so it's a unique shape, it's going to hopefully hold your attention more, and then your eye is going to bounce back to this one over here, and then this is just going to sort of continue your eye through. So, we've got some Genestra, and like I said, I didn't do a lot of prep work on this stuff, so. So the key is to weave it in so it all looks like it's kind of grown together. And if we have Toomie, we can prune it off a little bit. This over the filler. Then we want to create a little bit of a foundation and probably use some more dendrobium, some more orchids. Now here's where it's important when you select materials, look at those materials really carefully. Look at the difference between that straight one and this one that has a nice curve to it. So use the characteristics of the material you have whether it's something you're harvesting out of the yard or whether it's something you're purchasing, you know, so that you can kind of use that. So that's got a nice curve to it as well. This one's got a little bit more exaggerated curve, so we're going to come in here, we're going to reinforce that. So using that actual shape of the stem, being respectful of that is what's so critically important. And then if we do it on this side, this one's a little different. I'm going to bring it down and weave it in a little bit more. And let's see what else we've got here. Another one.
What is the name of that flower you're putting in there?
This is a dendrobium orchid.
Dendrobium.
So whites, purples, greens, all kinds of fun colors. But instead of having any lines radiating out, we want to reinforce the circular form that we're using here. So we're bringing everything to where the stems go out and come back up. So we sort of got this circular form established. So now, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot about these. Some really wild tulips in the cooler that we're getting ready to be tossed because they're kind of hard to work with as a component in a regular fresh arrangement. But they're perfect to work into here so that we can kind of weave them in. And you got the shape already. It's all curved. The stem's very pliable because they've been growing out. So we're going to make sure we've got good physical insertions, but then we're going to bring that up and we're going to work it in. So that one's going to come in the back here a little bit. And most people really, you know, have trouble with tulips because you don't have much physical control over them. They sort of do their own thing. And I'll tell you, I think the best thing to do is just respect that of the tulips and just let them do their own thing. So work it where you can or manipulate it where you can. So if we can do something where we can work it into or around another material so that it holds it in place, that's the way to work with tulips. Not to try and wire them or control them or cut them so short. Because what happens is the neck of the tulip gets so very weak that you can't cut it short and use it and manipulate it. It just doesn't work.
And those will last a couple of days?
Yeah, you'll be okay. The nice thing about this show is you've only got 2 days.
Yeah, I know.
Instead of 3 or 4 like previous shows. So that really does make a huge difference, I think, in terms of what you're going to have to do there. So then we've got, we'll just give this a foundation. Worried about these hydrangeas are kind of really leggy. All right. So I want to keep this hydrangea down as low as a foundation item as I can. And since it's, if you cut a hydrangea on these side panicles here, they really won't hold up. So I'm going to put this in. I'm going to leave a decent stem on it, and I'm going to put it in at a slight angle, like that, making sure I get it really inserted so the stem is down in the wood. But because I can't get it in there short enough to just create a foundation, we're going to use it in a slightly different way. I don't want it to become too much of an element, so I'm really going to put the hydrangeas on the side in very, very, very tight. So it really doesn't take much away from the line of the circle. Beautiful lilies. And of course, again, the form of the lily is going to be a perfect flower to create an area of emphasis. your eye is going to hit that because of the shape and the form of the flower itself. Still use some buds, because the buds are going to give us a little bit more of this form of extension in the shape of the flower. So we can use that in a curved position. Give us a little bit more oomph there. And I'm going to fill in a little bit of green hypericum. I can't see in the front. Sorry, I'm going to have to turn this around to see where I've got a hole at.
Oh, yeah.
Hypericum just coming in a little bit to fill up and cover the mechanics.
Tommy, that's absolutely gorgeous, but I guess it's about $500 with material.
Actually, with the Phalaenopsis, it would be. But again, you can do this form with tulips or with a flowering branch. So if you have quince in the yard or something, you know, or forsythia, since this is not a color category, you know, you can, it doesn't have to be monochromatic. You could use anything like that out of the yard to get flowers and things all the way around it. So it doesn't have to have these ultra expensive oriental lilies in it. A little bit of that hypericum up, just so we carry that element up into the design itself and help write some mechanics here. I mean, I have every single. You have to look at ways you can do this differently. You know, if you're worried about what the materials are, but it's a way that you know, again, it's about using that circular form in a vertical format. So how can you bring something to that and create, you know, you can get that circle shape out.
Monochromatic?
Is this, yeah, this one's monochromatic, but this category is not monochromatic. I think it's the other category. But this could work for either category too, because you got this one monochromatic. But, you know, you can easily take this and, like I said, do forsythia or quince or some flowering branches in April and create this out of the flowering branch. And then you would have much less floral to deal with.
Would you turn it so we can see the other
Sure.
side too?
I didn't finish it quite as perfectly, but it's still around.
It's pretty.
Yeah. So it's more about just trying, and again, you know, I'm trying to get this done in a little bit of a hurry, so. So, you know, that's just another way to use a circular form. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not an artist, so maybe give some advice about this, but in the past, I've had trouble knowing, like, when to stop.
Yeah.
Because usually it's after 2 glasses of wine and it's midnight and I'm like, "Get another flower here." Is there any good advice about how to feel when it's done?
When you first had the first question of it, stop. And probably take the last 2 flowers you stuck in out. So the key, I think, to that is understanding that when Rodin made a sculpture, he removed and left only what was important. So knowing when to stop is really, really critical. And one of the things to really remember is that don't take every good idea you've ever seen and put it in one arrangement. I'm married to someone who loves to collect plants and lots of different ideas, and it's really challenging because pick one idea, one theme, and go with it. So the simplicity of this is the form and the all white flowers with the foliage. So keeping it that simple and then just having this accent at the bottom. So this actually creates that emphasis and lets your eye create the circle motion around it. So yeah, stopping quickly is, yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah, yeah.
And does every floral design always have some dominant and then some other less dominant? Is that a
And that is why I think to start with it's important and why we're kind of working through basics today is that having that area of emphasis, so something that is dominant to hit your eye. It's easier to see in something like this because it's all white, so you know it's here with the hydrangeas and your eye travels around. So having something that is dominant and then to create rhythm, so what you want other than to have your eye hit somewhere and know where to go in an arrangement, then creating the rhythm is by bringing that out and then in this case bringing the phalaenopsis out because it's the second most important thing here. And so that creates that, so dominant, secondary, and tertiary even in that order. So you need to think about that, whether you do it by placing the larger flowers in that position, the feature flowers in that position, or low in the design at the rim of the container. There's lots of ways to create emphasis.
So you have the primary and secondary, you have to have balance?
So it all has to have balance. So this, because of the circular form, this is automatically balanced. Well, we can make it all balanced if we throw all these orchids over here. But so balance and rhythm, because if it isn't balanced, it's not going to have good rhythm. Your eye's not going to move through it. So part of it is physical balance as well as visual balance. And part of that then comes down to too, what I was talking about, a little bit of tension. And so we're actually going to talk about tension a little bit more in a sample I have a little bit later. Of things kind of not to do, but to talk about why it's so different. So yeah, any other questions?
Okay, how important is like the theme, like, one of them, I think the monochromatic.
Yeah.
It's like love.
Yeah.
So I was just like, oh my God, I'm not gonna do a heart.
Yeah.
I was like, looking
I'll
at
go
those
ahead.
symbols, and I'm like,
So and again, what I'm doing is probably not paying as much attention to your GCA rules and your GCA. So be sure to look at the scoring points in your schedule so you know what most of it is. So if, for example, 30 points out of 100 is based on the color harmony in the monochromatic one, then you want to make sure you're hitting that. So look at that schedule and see what your points are. So you prioritize whether it's creativity or adherence to the theme or whatever it is. The schedule has those in there. I did notice those in there. Yeah.
Can you speak to how we come get the flowers, how
Yeah.
that process works?
We will talk about that, and I will actually get that out in an email. I'll send it to somebody, and we'll get it out in an email. So while you're here, you might want to meet Patty. She was in the back of the room a while ago. Many of you have worked with Patty before, and so Patty's our flower buyer here. You can also go to a store, but all the flowers come here before they go to stores, so it's kind of easier to do here. So we will send out Patty's email. So if you have a list or some ideas you're thinking about, the best thing is to send her an email to kind of start the discussion. So I'm looking for this, I'm thinking about that. And she'll tell you if it's seasonal, if it's going to be very expensive, if she has to buy 50 stems and you only want 3. She will tell you those kinds of things so that you either know to go down that path or she'll try and suggest some alternatives too that are seasonal. So it's best to start with email because there's a lot of requests coming in because all the store managers are talking to her 2 or 3 times a day too. And so, if you have an idea of what you're looking for color-wise or material-wise, if you kind of send her a list and quantities, that's the best way to start. And probably, you need to be thinking about that pretty soon because we order flowers with the supply chain issues now and transportation. We're ordering flowers from farms 2 to 3 weeks out just to get anything. So, by early April, you really need to be thinking about what you're really wanting to do or what you need because it's just such a slow process now at the farm level. There is no inventory in Miami. There's very little inventory in California. And so we are having to work ahead and put bids in at the farm level or at the broker level or even in Holland to make sure we're on the list to get stuff cut for us at a certain time. And there's always stuff here. I mean, you can come here and I know Amy Cook comes here a lot of times and just whatever's here I'm going to work with. So, that's fine too because there's always stuff in the cooler.
What's the name of the grassy flower?
This?
Yes.
Genestra. So it's a member of the Scotch broom family.
Oh, okay.
So if you've got any broom in your yard, it's usually yellow here. It's very fragrant. It's a legume. So it's also very fragrant. You can tell by the shape of the individual flower on it. Yeah. So this is going to be hard to see. You'll probably have to see it afterwards. And you can get up and gather around if you want to. Stir up around anyway because it's going to be hard to tell what I'm doing in here. And this really came to mind during, I think, the last workshop we had here, maybe 2 workshops ago, when we were doing some bubble bowls and things.
Yes.
And there were more struggles than I thought there would be. So I thought, well, let me kind of go through this, just how I would mechanically do it. So you can see, again, this is kind of, I'm just playing off the circular form. You can do lots of other things based on, but I was just trying to bring some of these into, if not completely literally, but at least figuratively into your categories. So with this, I'm going to start because I want a little bit of material that I can start to stabilize my materials in when I put them in there. And so I'm going to use a little bit of curly.
Glass bubbles or the bottom?
These are just glass chips because it helps me to be able to stick stems into them and stabilize it without a lot of alternative mechanics. And that way I can go right into water. So I just picked some really loose, sorry, it's a working warehouse, so.
Tell me which topic is this?
This is kind of inspired by, it's got the circle. So this is still the circle one.
Okay.
Or it could fit into monochromatic as well because we're just going to use yellow and white tones with a little bit of foliage. So I've used this curly willow, and this was kind of the weedy part of the willow that's typically hard to use. So I've just woven it in there because what that's going to give me is a framework to do that in. So we're going to start with tulips because tulips or calla lilies are some of the easiest flowers to manipulate and to use in a circular form. And I probably should have not only cleaned these in advance, but I should have left them out of the water for a little bit because these are pretty turgid. So the key is, and what I've seen in the past from my experience here, is that people love to just go in that way and then go this way. So again, if you want to create good visual rhythm in the design, you want them to go the same way all the time. So that means the stems are at one end and the flowers, or the heads are always going the other way. So we want to put those stems down in the glass chips to stabilize them, make sure they get water. And because we want this to be a linear design, we want a lot of visual rhythm in there. We want our eye to move around. We're going to strip a lot of that foliage off. And if we have trouble keeping something in place, that's what we're using that curly willow branch for. So if we want that head to go down, we just weave it into the curly willow a little bit more. Stripping the foliage off. If you use something like mini callas, you don't have to worry about that nearly so much. And again, you could do this in a big bubble bowl. It certainly would fit the category. Encasing things is certainly not a very new technique, but it's about execution. And this time we don't have to worry about 3 days on exhibit. We don't have to worry about a lot of things. So I hope it's a lot more fun than the nerves. I want you to, most importantly, I think you should enjoy this. Don't get overly worked up about it. Try, get some feedback, and just grow through it. That's kind of the key part.
I have a question on the clear bowls. Are we allowed to have the end stems showing?
I can't imagine not having them showing in here or working them into the thing. I think it's, as long as they're down in the water or in the glass, and I'm not going to spend the time with all the double checks on mechanics once I get these in here. But I would go around and make sure that all of these were sticking down in the glass chips, and then even if I had to move some glass chips over to cover them or anything, I would do that probably. So in this case, I want this to be a little more special. I have some really runty hydrangeas, which are better than the other ones we get because they're very much more compact. They don't have all those long peduncles on them, so I can just put them down in there a lot easier and work them in. So we're going to kind of look. That was one of the bigger blooms. In order to create some dominance, we're going to put a medium-sized bloom next to it. And then we're going to work a single big bloom elsewhere in the container so that our eye knows it's more important to go there. So our eye's going to go there, it's going to go here, and then it can go to a little accent piece. Cool bud I'll stick down in there. And then if I want to put a little bit more yellow in it, a little more drama, we can still add some yellow lilies or some yellow roses or something just to keep it monochromatic in this case.
So is that considered monochromatic if you're using the white and the yellow?
Yeah, all you do is just say the white is the lightest shade, the lightest tint of yellow. Monochromatic's tints, tones, shades of a single hue. So if you go all the way to white, white should be able to be included. Jan, where's Jan?
Jan?
Looking for the rule. Anything different in GCA that I would interpret?
Hillary's the expert on this.
Hillary?
I don't think that, I mean, you can do tones of the same color. I don't know about white and yellow.
Was it in color?
If they would consider that two colors.
Huh?
I'm guessing. I'm guessing that the judge would say that's.
So, again, you guys are dealing with GCA, I'm just dealing with me.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
I'm filming this for the club. It's beautiful.
This is going to be hard to hold up because it's going to shift. Who feels like carrying it around? Anybody? It's heavy, huh? It's heavy. Maybe heavy or somebody can.
You already, here, let me.
Don't make it too heavy to carry to your car
Yeah.
into Woodstock.